Our first democratic elections brought the tyranny of apartheid to an end, a system that this General Assembly had declared to be a crime against humanity. In adopting Resolution 2202A in 1966, as later endorsed by the Security Council in 1985, the United Nations was a beacon of hope in our quest for justice. The great wave of solidarity of the peoples of the world, led by the United Nations, turned the tide against apartheid. Today, democracy flourishes in South Africa. We have a progressive constitution, an entrenched human rights culture, and strong institutions. We have laws to advance equality and programs to protect society's most marginalized and vulnerable. We continue to transform our economy so that it is in a more competitive position to create jobs, to attract more investment, and that it should benefit all. South Africa is a party to global treaties on human rights, gender equality, children's rights, refugee protection, and environmental protection. A few days ago, South Africa also endorsed the pact that charts the course for a better future for global governance and towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As signatory to the Paris Agreement, we are contributing our fair share towards the global effort and have a just energy transition plan to guide our carbon journey and climate resilient development. Through the African Union, we are working to advance Agenda 2063. We are involved in mediation and conflict resolution across our continent and actively contribute to peacekeeping missions. Our political culture has evolved and it continues to mature. We have just held our 7th free and fair general elections since our democracy, paving the way for the formation of the government of national unity. 10 political parties have coalesced around a common agenda for economic growth, job creation, poverty eradication, and sustainable development. South Africa is in a new era, an era of great promise. In what some have called our second miracle, South Africans of all races have rallied behind the government of national unity. We are making headway in resolving some of our most pressing challenges. Our economy has started to improve and investor confidence is on the rise. Our country's prospects look bright, and we look to the future with great hope. The South African story bears witness to the enduring role of the United Nations in global matters. In supporting our struggle, the United Nations affirmed the principles of the UN Charter, the fundamental human rights, the dignity and worth of every person, and the equal rights of nations, large and small. It affirmed the aspiration contained in the Universal Declaration of Rights that we should strive for a world free of barbarous acts that outrage the conscience of humankind. genocide was declared. The Hamas attack that killed 1,200 people and where hostages were taken. As South Africa, we have condemned this attack. In response, Israel embarked on an act of collective punishment in its assault on the people of Gaza. The torment of the people of Gaza continues unabated. More than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed. Homes, hospitals, churches, mosques, and schools lie destroyed. Famine and disease stalk the streets of Gaza. This cannot but shock our collective humanity. The violence the Palestinian people are being subjected to is a grim continuation of more than half a century of apartheid that has been perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel. We South Africans know what apartheid looks like. We lived through apartheid. We suffered and died under apartheid. We will not remain silent and watch as apartheid is perpetrated against others. Through the United Nations and the instruments it wields, we must end the suffering that Palestinians are being subjected to. We are called upon to uphold the principles of the UN Charter and to uphold consistently and in their entirety the fundamental tenets of international law. International law cannot be applied selectively. No one state is more equal than any other. In December last year, South Africa approached the International Court of Justice, seeking an order to prevent Israel from committing genocide against the people of Gaza. We did so in terms of our obligations as a state party to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. As South Africa, we welcome the support that a number of countries have given to the case that we have launched at the ICJ. The ICJ's orders make it clear that there is a plausible case of genocide against the people of Gaza. They further make it clear that states must also act to prevent genocide by Israel and to ensure that they are not themselves party to the violation of the Genocide Convention by aiding or assisting in the commission of genocide. We reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire and for the release of all hostages. The only lasting solution is the establishment of a Palestinian state, a state that will exist side by side with Israel, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Our moral conscience further demands that we exert every effort to bring peace also to other countries, especially the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to Sudan, to Ukraine, and other parts of the African continent. We must realize the aspirations of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination. Achieving and maintaining peace and security requires the collective will of the community of nations gathered here. It requires that the UN Security Council should be a more representative body and inclusive. 78 years since its formation, the structure of the United Nations Security Council remains largely unchanged. Africa and its 1.4 billion people remain excluded from its key decision-making structures. This cannot continue. The Security Council has not fulfilled its mandate to maintain international peace and security. The UN Security Council must be reformed as a matter of agency. We would like to see the Security Council being more inclusive so that the voices of all nations can be heard and be considered. It cannot remain an exclusive club of just 5 nations to the exclusion of the many nations in the world. Africa stands ready to play its role in building a safer global order by participating in the work of the UN Security Council on the basis of respect and acceptance. The African Union and its member states are engaged in mediation, in dialogue and diplomacy across our continent to create conditions under which peace and development can take hold. There must be greater collaboration between the United Nations and the African Union towards resolving a number of conflicts and also in addressing the root causes of conflicts that continue to rage. Pandemics and endemics pose a serious threat to us all. We are concerned by the spread of mpox across the world and in Africa in particular. We urge the international community to mobilize vaccines and other medical countermeasures for deployment where they are most needed. Economic prosperity is key to sustainable peace. Through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are establishing the foundation for a massive increase in trade and investment and infrastructure in our continent. The AFCFTA will further integrate regional economies and accelerate Africa's industrialization and economic growth. The climate crisis is now a full-blown climate emergency in the world. It impacts very devastatingly to both countries and citizens of many countries. Extreme weather, such as flooding, fires, and droughts, are becoming wreaking havoc on societies, economies, and the livelihoods of ordinary people. Despite being least responsible for climate change, developing economy countries, and particularly African countries, are bearing the brunt of what they did not create and are in the front line. As South Africa, we remain committed to contributing our fair share to reduce global emissions, guided by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. We have adaptation and mitigation programs and policies in place and have passed a climate change law to further support our emissions reduction targets. It is essential that climate actions do not deepen global inequality or stifle the developmental aspirations of the Global South. The industrialized nations are not honoring their climate commitments, and we repeat the call for predictable and sustainable financing for climate action. We must operationalize the agreed-upon climate financing and capacity-building instruments to advance mitigation and adaptation. Pursuing sustainable development necessitates that those with greater means should support those who lack them. The world faces annual financing gap of some $4 trillion to achieve sustainable development. We call on better resourced countries to scale up their levels of support to developing economic countries. Debt is the millstone around the neck of many developing economic countries, stifling their potential and development. Debt servicing is robbing a number of countries of much-needed funds to support health, education, and social spending. South Africa endorses the United Nations Secretary General's call for the reform of the global financial architecture to enable developing economic countries to lift themselves out of the quicksand of debt. We must commit to systems for financing development that are more accessible, agile, and equitable. In 2025, South Africa will assume the presidency of the G20. We will use this important role to advocate for the peoples of Africa and all of the Global South, for their development and advancement. South Africa welcomes the adoption of the Pact for the Future and congratulates our sister country, Namibia, as well as for the Federal Republic of Germany for having ably steered the United Nations towards the adoption of the resolution in this regard. This Pact of the Future is a platform for us to focus on those actions we need to take together to build a world in which the equal worth of every person and the equal worth of every country is recognized and valued. We particularly welcome the commitments to place poverty eradication at the center of all our efforts, and for the Sustainable Development Goals financing gap in developing countries to be closed. The disparities in wealth and development within and between countries is simply unjust and unsustainable. We must continue to strive for equal treatment, for equal opportunity and advancement for all individuals and all nations. The Pact for the Future must reinvigorate international solidarity, like veins that carry sustenance to every part of the body. Solidarity is the lifeblood of human progress. It binds us together to nourish the greater good. It is achieving the greater good for the common good to which we all strive. Through dialogue, through respect for the rule of law, through the advancement of human rights, through cooperation and solidarity, we can and we will be able to achieve a better world for all the peoples of the world. I thank you.
Agradezco.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of South Africa. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Mohamed Muisu, President of the Republic of Maldives.
You're still watching our coverage of the United Nations General Assembly, the 79th of it. And we just listened to South Africa's President, Cyril Ramaphosa, speak to the Assembly on very pertinent issues. I'd just like to highlight a few things he talked about. He touched on all the predicted subject matter that the media team put out prior to this presentation. He talked about international peace, security, SDGs, implementation of the 2030 agenda, climate change, preparedness for pandemic, addressing pandemic issues, and he talked about the war in Gaza, and then a key quote there for me is Israel's act of collective punishment for the people of Gaza. He also talked about the violence being something that should shock our collective humanity. And he likened it to apartheid experience of South Africa. He said, grim reflection of apartheid, what is being done to Palestinians. That's just some of the highlight of his speech. Okay, I think in my haste to talk about what the South African president said, I did not introduce myself. Before now, you had...
of course, Mazzino and Tolu Adelero Balogun, hold it down, News Central special coverage of the United Nations General Assembly 78th edition. I mean, this has been on for some days now. And just like what, 79th edition. And of course, just like what Felicity did say, you just saw the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, give his address at the Assembly. But just for formalities, my name is Dakwa Adegboye, and the beautiful Felicity. Of course, I am Felicity Ezewike. We have joining us to take a look at some of the things that the South African president has said. We're joined by David Matsanga, Africa Affairs Analyst. Thank you very much, David. It's good to see you again. It's been a minute.
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me see whether am I audible all the way from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania?
Wow.
You hear?
Well, anyway, let's get to it. I believe you watched the speech of Cyril Ramaphosa. He said quite a number of things. He talked extensively about what is going on in Gaza. We know way before now, South Africa didn't just speak, but they took a step to drag Benjamin Netanyahu, that's the Israeli leader, to international court, on crimes of against humanity. I'd like you to speak on what you feel as regards some of the things he said at the Assembly.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. And I'm very honored to be one of the few people analyzing the speeches of the African heads of state and the world leaders who are in New York. I am one of the few people who does not agree that African heads of states should troop into New York every year, making long speeches, coming out with less action. We are not united on our continent, first of all. But let me come to your question straight away, as you asked. Yes, the only good thing that South Africa has done so far that I can see is going to the courts in the ICJ to put up a case against Israel. But as you know, ICJ is not a court that has teeth to bite. ICJ is a court that recommends. It doesn't have teeth warrants to arrest you. The only court that has warrants to arrest you is International Criminal Court, which is a few meters away from the ICJ. So what the world should have done was to go, if there is any, is to go through one of those agencies of International Criminal Court. But the good thing that Ramaphosa has so far done, demonstrated, although I was very critical of his going and leaving Africa with so many problems. There is nobody who has solved the problem of Libya. There's nobody who has solved the problem of Central African Republic, North Sudan, Somalia. We have not taken people to court. And yet these are the same people who supply arms to these countries to fight. But he has done a great job on that one, as I can see and I say it candidly here.
All right, Matsanga, there's something that he talked about. He said the only solution is the establishment of a Palestinian state to exist side by side with Israel, while calling for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages. Is this the solution? And do you think you don't seem to have a lot of enthusiasm for the UNGA that is commemorated all the time? So, but does his speech to a global audience have some teeth?
It has in the sense that at the moment, Felicity, it is the United Nations, everybody in the world is looking at how to end the war. But all the leaders who are in UNGA are just dishonest. All of them, starting from President Biden to the rest, they are dishonest. They know how they can end this war. The only way to end this war is to bring a two-state solution that was negotiated in the Camp David and the Oslo agreements. If you bring those two-state solution and give the Palestinians the right to exist, that is when the war can end. But here we have America, which is one of the biggest bullies across the world. It pushes people to do things, yet they know what they are doing. America knows where these terrorists are. Biden knows where they are. They know it. They are in Qatar. Felicity and my brother there, if you go to Qatar, open up, if you know Arabic, you will see the Taliban offices. Taliban offices. You will be Al-Shabaab. You will see Boko Haram offices there. Now, why does America allow these offices to exist? They have Hamas offices in Qatar. Tell Hamas, why don't you sit down on table? The attack on Israel last October is what has sparked this catastrophe of over 30,000 people dead. That is a very huge number compared even to the Second World War. So we have killed people, but yet we know. That's why I call the whole UNGA, the whole trooping in New York is dishonesty of the highest degree. Because all these leaders who are talking know who is the problem, know where the terrorists are. They don't even denounce. You will see a leader of United Arab Emirates coming there to say he doesn't know anything about the guns that are killing people in Sudan. Yet he's supplying drones. Yet he's supplying arms that are killing black people in Sudan, in Libya. They have divided Libya. So all these things are sweet stories for me.
All right, David Matsanga. I mean, I would like to ask my next question, but you seem to not, in its entirety, fancy the idea of the General Assembly of the United Nations. For you, you feel it's a bit of hypocrisy. I bet to think that is where you're headed, with your line of thought. But what would you rather, suggest as, an alternative, if at all, that you feel will be more efficient and effective than what is obtainable at the moment?
That will not be a talk shop, because at the end of the day, whatever violence goes on in the background, there has to be a talk shop where we can agree on something. So this is one of the platforms. If you're against it, I mean, whatever you're going to suggest, it's also going to be a talk shop, isn't it?
No. Look at Felicity. Look at this point. The United Nations Security Council, 5 members, they are quarreling. They are the people fighting. Now you tell me, China, Russia versus America Britain and France. Okay? Is it under chapter 7 of the United Nations General Assembly? United Nations Security Council is supposed to keep peace. Article 39 and 40. Tell me, where are they keeping the peace? Where are they keeping the peace? It is better for us in Africa to come back to, you see, you were asking me a question, where are you heading? I'm heading back to our continent. Let's get out of, you see, these guys are the people who are guardians of peace. They are supposed to keep peace.
Okay, David, I'm all for, expressing our personal views, but let's look at it in the context of the speech that has been given by South African president. He talked about working through the AU to advance the Agenda 2063. He also talked about the efforts that African countries, particularly South Africa, is making to improve on progress for the people so that, they can have a stronger voice at the UN Security Council. This is an advocation that has been ongoing for a while. He also referenced that justice requires that the UN Security Council be more representative, that is, including the African continent. So let's look at it from that angle. 5 countries seem to hold the power. How soon? Just recently, the US also seconded the call for permanent seats for Africa. How soon will you see, do you see that happening, and will it help in some way?
First of all, I oppose the 2 slots. See, I oppose, and there's so many Africans, millions of us, don't want 2 slots. We want more. Why do you give us 2 slots? And then you give us 2 slots without veto. How do you invite me to your house? And you invite me to your studio and tell me to sit there while you talk and I don't talk? Why do you invite me to your house and tell me, come to my house, but don't eat? This is exactly what United States of America is suggesting. We want more slots. In fact, Africa should be given 4 slots from 4 onwards, because we're 1.4 billion compared to Britain, which is 100 million, compared to France, which is less than 100 million. Look at that. We are 1.4 billion people. This is not personal. This is academic. Tell me why we should have two slots in the UN, then we don't veto. Then
I think where I was headed with that question, David, is do you see that happening at this 79th Assembly? Will that conversation be strengthened with some sort of documentation that a permanent seat is imminent, maybe in the not too distant future?
A permanent seat is like Agenda 2063. First, we have Agenda 2063. African Union told us to do our passports. We did photographs. We sent the photograph to Addis Ababa. Have we achieved it? No. Let's leave African Union for now, because you asked a question about agenda that Ramaphosa talked about 2063. What has 2063 done to people? Are you waiting for 2063 in Nigeria where you are? When people don't have electricity, when people don't have drinking water, when people don't have, why do you wait for Agenda 2063? Agenda 63 is made by World Bank, IMF. These are the planners. These are the same people who siphon money from us, resources from us. We have a note. We go on the bank with them. They lend us the money that they have got from us, and then we say we are waiting for Agenda 263. Let the agenda begin now. People in Nigeria want food. People in Nigeria want housing. You cannot tell them 2063. When will 2063 come? Will you be there? I will not be there. God willing, He knows when to take me. So let people put
David. David.
this thing of development. It's not worth it. Let's do it now.
David, let's come back to one of the things the South African president did say in his speech. He talked about the climate crisis. And in his words, he said that the African continent seems to be the worst hit when it comes to the fallout of industrialization and all of that. And he also talked about the issue of climate financing. And I know that at some point there was talks on compensation, particularly for the African continent. I would like you to speak on that.
Again, there you are, Felicity. We promise. From 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, we are now going to 2029. Promise. The polluters, America, China, France, and others are not, and Russia, they are not paying. We have become victims. They have not paid Africa. They have not brought that money physically. I have gone to all these conferences, Felicity and my brother. We have been to these conferences. I've been there and telling people that this is lip service. That is why I started Felicity. On a wrong note, I don't like these meetings. These are useless club meetings where long speeches, little money wasted for Nigeria. Someone going with a delegation of about 50. What are you going to bring there? What has Nigeria got? One dam, 241 waterfalls. You lack electricity. Where are we going to eat? All this pollution is coming from not Nigeria. Pollution is coming from China and America. They are the people hitting the world. Why don't they bring the money cash? That's what I insist. That's why my president of Uganda, for example, His Excellency Museveni, when he hears my voice and I talk about these things, he doesn't go to these conferences. He's not there. He has. I have asked him.
David, you know, one thing you and I have always disagreed on is, looking for pointers for growth for us, because our problems are known to all of us. We know what our challenges are. And like it or not, efforts might be small, but they are there. And these leaders, as much as we condemn them, that speech by South African president was very rich. And talking about it being rich, I want your reflection on the things he said about South Africa's growth specifically. He talked about an evolving political culture and used the government of national unity as an instance of that growth. He's also talked about the fact that South Africa is in a new era of great promise. Like I mentioned, he also said democracy and progressive constitution. He was highlighting the positive growth that has happened in South Africa in preparedness for taking on more global challenges. Of course, the G20 presidency, he talked about how South Africa is going to use it to better the lot of the continent. This is growth, isn't it? And shouldn't we be celebrating some of this as they speak on this global platform? And maybe this would help push our agenda further.
First of all, Felicity, I've never disagreed with you. I understand the predicament you are in because you have never been in South Africa at all. South Africa itself has no power. If you are working like on TV, it goes off. It hasn't got power. You have to use generators too. Then it says we have made progress. What progress is there? When apartheid regime was there, there was power. But there's no power in South Africa too. In South Africa, how do you say you are progressing when you don't like Nigerians going to South Africa? When you beat them, you kill them, you chase all the black people from South Africa, and you come to this platform to tell people we are moving very well, we are making a better Africa. Which Africa? We liberated South Africa. Some of us are soldiers. We went to liberate South Africa. We stood firm and fought for the liberation of South Africa. Now South Africa doesn't like black people. I don't care. You don't call Nigerians names. You don't call Cameroonians names. You don't call Mozambicans
David,
names.
When I say you and I disagree sometimes, I don't mean just particularly on this conversation. I mean, just like I asked about some of the positives that the South African president has brought out about what is happening in South Africa. What you picked out was also the challenge. Every country has their challenge. I'm just asking you, in light of the conversation about getting us a better representation? The growth that South Africa is alleging via its president, is it something that will maybe push the button just a little in our quest to get, you know, more recognition for the continent? That was where I was headed with that question.
It is good, Felista, for the guests and tourists to come, to go to South Africa. That's okay. But it's usually on the ground, Felicity, my sister, things are different. South Africans will tell you they are worse off. That's why they have turned on Nigerians, they have turned on the Cameroonians, beating them, slaughtering them, banning them. They don't want them there. Two, there is some progress in terms of democracy in South Africa. And I began by acknowledging that President Ramaphosa has done a great thing to take a case. And by the way, it is us, some of us wrote part of that case. When they wanted to arrest Putin, I wrote a document for South Africa. And I told them, I don't like ICC in my life. You can kill me, you can shoot me, you can do whatever you want. But ICC is not a court. It's a court set for Africans. It only collects Africans. Otherwise, Tony Blair, we should have put him in court. Bush should be in court. They used fake documents to invade countries, destroy, cause us terrorists who roam around and kill us, who supply arms to Boko Haram, to Al Qaeda, and all places. We have a lot of anger. Most of us who have been in this field, we have a lot of anger of the double standards that some of these countries have used. Therefore, I began by saying South Africa has made progress. South Africa's democracy of national unity, government of national unity, there is progress. It is only in South Africa where you can vote, and go home without violence. That's okay. But the rest of these other things that he talked about have not been realized. The economy is not in a good shape. The people there want Ramaphosa, like they want him out. That's why you see ANC went down. So when he's talking on international scene, Felista and my brother, he's impressing the international scene. And I've told you already, I am a critic of UNGA. It is a waste of smaller countries. Togo, going with 220 people, 50 people. How many dollars, how much have you wasted?
All right.
Nigeria.
David Matsanga, I'm sorry to interrupt your line of thought, but we really need to go on a quick commercial break. When we return, we will definitely pick up from there. And we'll also look at how all of this will impact on the African continent. Do stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. This is still News Central's special coverage of the United Nations General Assembly, the 79th edition. It's also important that we state that News Central actually has a team on ground there live at the venue of this event. Now, this event is meant to run from the 22nd to the 30th of September. And of course, it's a global event. We still have David Matsanga, our, of course, international affairs analyst. He's joining virtually. David, thank you for staying with me.
Thank you very much, Felicity, and my brother. Your name is very complicated, so I only have crammed.
Okay, let's just help you out. It's Dapo. Just say Dapo.
Thank you very much, Felicity and Dapo.
Yes. Great.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Felicity.
Yes.
All right. I think we should move this conversation and maybe focus a little on climate change and a just energy transition. That was one of the things he talked about. You know, there has to be willful action, commitment. As much as the UNGA for you is talk shop, would there be some very basic things you would expect towards strengthening our energy responses and this transition plan that has been talked about for a very long time?
First of all, the polluters must pay, and the polluters are not paying. We are not the polluters. The polluters have committed themselves in COP28. They committed to pay billions of dollars. This money has not reached where South Africa needs it to plant trees, to come back and do environmental, clean energy, to put clean energy instead of fossil energies and so on. This has not reached the people. That is all. I thank Ramaphosa for bringing it out, because it is one of the things that is changing very rapidly. And yet the people who promised all this money are coming back with something. My brother Dafoe and Felicity, they are saying we now want to buy something called carbon credit, which is now more confusing to Africans. The carbon credit, hectares and hectares. Not everybody knows what carbon credit in Africa is. Somebody comes to Nigeria and says, I'm buying carbon credit. Now, instead of giving us the money to encourage people on the ground to plant trees, when you cut a tree, plant a tree. There are some countries in Africa that are doing very well on environment, but some countries are not having enough resources to do climate preservation. Change is coming very fast, yet there is no resource. There are no resources coming from the pledges that the bigger countries, the polluters, the real culprits of polluting the world have committed to do. United States of America, if Trump comes to power, we have a problem. He's going to say, hello, I have no money. He has already warned us. Africa will be on its own. And yet they continue to produce gas, bad gases that go into changing the weather. Patterns have changed everywhere, landslides, mudslides, all these things are killing people. So we need money, that pledges that were made.
Now, let's aside maybe, monies, in terms of compensation from the West, let's look homegrown. As Africans, yes, within our countries, right, what can be done to further sort of boost this climate drive? Because, it's biting hard. Times of the year where you would expect rain to fall, you don't see it. Countries are complaining of drought. There's flooding in certain countries. It's irrespective of where you are. So my question to you is this: as Africans, what can we do? How can we take ownership? How can we take responsibility?
First of all, we need to come back ourselves to our own Organization of African Unity, AU, or I'll call it African Union. We've left it as a shell. We have not I saw on your program a river in a place, in one of the places where they were showing there used to be a river and the people are walking, the river is gone. But this is in Nigeria itself. So the Nigerian government should look at how can they, start doing something about the climate change. And that is what I'm trying to say, that they should now have programs, start educating people how to maintain, to keep the climate, how to make sure that we don't have these harsh things coming to us, our rivers drying, everything going, and then change the mindsets of the people who are destroying this environment. It is being done everywhere. Change the methods. Remove generators, for example. 3/4 of the people in your country and other countries use generators. Why? You have 241 waterfalls. I've counted them. 241 good waterfalls that can produce hydroelectric power that is not polluting power. Why don't you build some of these friendly dams that can produce power without a lot of destruction of the environment, the ecosystems of that place, so that water still comes out, but the environment goes well. That is what the governments in Africa should think. But we can't think when we are not united.
All right. Now,
that is one problem.
All right. Another issue, of course, of concern is the economic challenges that many African countries are facing. For instance, Nigeria has an inflation rate of almost 40%. Other African countries too, their currency currently struggling. There is food insecurity amongst, a plethora of issues. We are seeing companies, multinationals leave, countries and relocate. I mean, this is a major problem, near pandemic, if of course I'm permitted to use that word. What do you suggest can be done, to revive many of these struggling African nations, particularly post-COVID?
Look at this. We have food, for example, take Uganda. We have plenty of food. We don't import food at all. We waste some of the food. You see, look at people in Nigeria crying for food, famine. Why don't we have a method where Uganda can export this food so to Nigeria and get what they don't have in Uganda? One of the things that we have to begin doing now, we have over 2,000 currencies in Africa alone. Before you travel from Dar es Salaam up to Lagos, you have passed several currencies down there. So why don't we have a single currency? Why don't we have a common market? Why don't we have free trade? Remove the borders, start lending each other money.
Because I was about to ask about the single currency.
Interject. Maybe if you have a thought, just go ahead.
Okay, I mean, the single currency, that conversation has been on. It seems like it's dropped somewhere and maybe never to be revisited. We know ECOWAS, has been at the forefront of that unification of the currency and all of that. So I would like you to speak in that regard.
Yeah, I think to just add to it, it's in the same line of what he'd say. The AFCFTA, the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, talked about that as something that would improve trade in the region. Where are we with that? ECHO is just one aspect of it, but we do have a signed document for trade. How is that not working for Uganda and Nigeria, for instance? Why can't we have a seamless exchange where maybe what we need, we get, and then what Uganda needs, they get? That's what the AFCFTA is about.
First of all, that is on felicity, is theory. You can't move from Uganda to Nigeria without a visa. You need a visa to enter Nigeria. Nigerians can't go to South Africa. So how will you move? How will you move the goods? There's all customs. Every country is just fenced. They have fenced each other in their own countries. Even in areas, the only country, regional border that was working very well was ECOWAS. You are even moving further to using one currency. But do you know who the enemy is? Felix and Dwarf, my brother, Dwarf. The enemy is the external man who funds us. We don't have our own money. France came in. He said, no, you can't create a common currency. Because once you create a common currency, France will lose out. That's why you see your neighbors, top of you, some of them are disappearing into their own organization. Because they see there is no movement east. The one good thing that you people in ECOWAS have done, you have your passport. A Nigerian passport can be used in Ivory Coast, Gambia, Senegal, all those places are ECOWAS. But for us, in East Africa, you need a visa to enter DRC Congo, for example. You can't go there without a visa. We still have a problem, and yet we are in East African community. So there is a lot to be done. Theories, that is why I told you, Ramaphosa is talking about the African continental free trade. It stopped in Kigali. Felicity, I have been attending, and my brother have been attending all these conferences. It stops on the microphone, like the way they have spoken there, and they shake hands and clap, we stop there. 44 countries have signed. Out of 44, only 20-something have ratified.
All right, David, we'll have to pick up this conversation subsequently. Our ongoing coverage of the 79th United Nations General Assembly continues here at News Central, but we'll pause for the moment, and then we will continue again. David, thank you very much for your input. We always appreciate it.
Thank you very much, all the time. thank you very much. I am available, but I am a critic of such conferences that waste people's money. Nigerian taxpayers' money is wasted. One man is going to speak, no good, nothing there. Is coming back. Uganda, the same. No, let's not allow that. Let's have our AU. Let's come back to Addis Ababa, Philista. Let's come back to Addis Ababa. You can't give us two slots.
Right,
your passion is actually the reason we come to you all the time. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. I guess we'll go on a short break now. We will be having Politics HQ come on, and then we will continue our live coverage of the United Nations General Assembly. Do stay with News Central. For now, I'm Felicity Ejike.
And I'm Dakbo at Digby. See you in a moment.